Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today, I'm talking about what I think are the top 5 albums of the year so far. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlists that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So far, it seems like 2025 has been another great year for music. When I sat down and started making my list for the top 5 albums of the year so far, I had a hard time coming down to just 5. So I've got my top 5, plus I've got some honorable mentions. And this is something I do every year, and then it's always fun to go back at the end of the year when I make my final best albums of the year list and see how many of these albums actually end up in the same spot on that final list. So my first honorable mention was released on April 12th, and that is A Tribute to Nirvana by Post Malone. So this was recorded during a live stream in 2020 with, it was Post Malone. I know he had Travis Barker on drums also. So the thing is with Nirvana, it's always going to be difficult to kind of match anything that Nirvana did in their career. But I think Post Malone did a really good job of honoring the legacy of the band. He did a better job than I thought he would at capturing that raw energy and emotion that Nirvana had in their career. It ended up being more of a tribute than a cover album. So at the beginning of every year, I do a video all about my most anticipated albums for the year, and this next honorable mention made it on that list. Came out on May 9th, and that is Butter Miracle, The Complete Suites by Counting Crows. So back in 2021, they released Butter Miracle Suite 1, which was just a really short EP. This is the expanded version of that, so it's got the songs from Suite 1 on there. Plus, that's got, I think it was 5 or 6 new tracks on here. This album was actually completed in 2022, and then Adam Duritz went back. He didn't like the direction of the new songs, so he ended up rewriting most of them, and I think what he ended up rewriting are some of the best songs on this album. This is the band's first album of all new material since 2014. You know, it's got that same Americana kind of roots rock vibe that you expect from Counting Crows, but I think this is far better than any of their last several albums. I don't have a physical copy of the next couple of honorable mentions that I've got, but I do plan on picking them up eventually. The first one was Parasomnia by Dream Theater. Came out February 7th. That's the band's first album with Mike Portnoy since 2009. I'm not a big fan of that progressive metal sound, but I was really surprised how much I enjoyed this album. And it was nice to see Mike back with the band. You know, Mike was kind of the driving force for the musical direction of the band, you know, from the founding of the band until he left. And while the band did release some good albums after Mike left, I think this album is kind of widely being hailed as one of the band's best albums in years. Another album that I really wasn't expecting to enjoy but ended up being on my honorable mentions list is Sweet by Mayday Parade. It was released on April 18th, and this is going to be the first album in a 3-album series from the band. And it's everything you expect to have on a Mayday Parade album. You know, it's anthemic, it's fun, it's energetic. I think it really shows the growth and the maturity the band has made over the last several years. I'm interested to see what they do with the other 2 parts of this series. I guess the main reason why I wasn't expecting to enjoy this album the way I did is I've just started getting into their music probably within the last year or so. Started listening to more of their albums. So when this album came out, it really wasn't on my radar, but you know, I've streamed it a bunch of times since it came out, and I've really enjoyed the album. Then my last honorable mention came out on May 26th, and that is the split EP from Generation Exit and Mark Lind and The Unloved. So the band does 4 songs on each side, and I think the really good thing about this album is I think it's really perfectly balanced. I think the 2 bands really complement each other's styles. It's a melodic street punk album with high energy, and I think the band did a really good job at capturing that live performance sound on this album. And whenever anyone talks about rock music being dead, Generation X is definitely one of those bands I point people to. They've quickly become one of my favorite new bands. All right, so now that we got past the honorable mentions, we're on to the top 5 albums of the year. So at number 5 is an album that came out back on January 31st, and that is Violet by LS Dunes. So LS Dunes is a super group made up of members from Southson, Coheed and Cambria, My Chemical Romance, and Thursday. And their debut album, Past Lives, came out in 2022. It was met with really positive reviews, but I was interested to see how they grew from that album to this. And then when Violet was released, I don't think I read a single bad review on this album. I think what makes this band so different than a lot of the other ones out there is the varied music style of each one of those musicians and the bands they came from, blending together and having the style that a lot of other bands today just don't have. And I'm expecting this band to do a lot of great things in the future. I'm interested to see how they continue to grow and progress in their career. So the album I got at number 4, I guess it's kind of cheating because it's a collection of EPs, but it's Together in Hell by Youth Fountain. This came out back on February 5th. So the Youth Fountain released their last album, Together and Lonesome, in 2023, and ended up being one of my favorite albums of that year. But what Youth Fountain has done after every album that they've released is they've gone back and released an acoustic EP. And this is a collection of all those different EPs together. They've only ever been released digitally. This is the first time they've been released on a physical format. I think this really shows the growth and evolution in Youth Fountain's sound, even since Together and Lonesome. You go back and listen to the studio versions. Actually, a lot of the songs on this one, I actually prefer the acoustic versions over the studio ones. And kind of along the same lines as Generation Exit and LS Dunes, Youth Fountain is another one of those bands I think has a really bright future. And with as popular as pop punk has been over the last several years, I'm surprised Youth Fountain hasn't gotten noticed more often. So if you're a fan of that style, go back and check out this album. Check out their other albums also. Number 3 is another album that was released earlier in the year. It came out on January 17th, and that's Balloonerism by Mac Miller. So this was recorded originally back in 2014, around the time that his Faces mixtape came out. I think Faces is kind of widely seen as one of his best works. So this album here, I'm not really sure why it was shelved, but had this one came out, had he released Balloonerism, I think this album would be seen as one of the best rap albums of its time. It's this soulful soundscape with rock and rap and jazz all kind of blended together on it. And it's kind of a bridge album from kind of what he was earlier in his career to what he would become. It's a deeply personal and honest album that, when this album came out earlier this year, I fully expected to be number 1 at this point. I think it's one of his best albums, and I think it shows the musical genius that he was. So my number 2 album of the year so far came out back on March 27th, and that was Life's a Glitch by Frankie and the Studs. The band that's fronted by Frankie Clark, who's the daughter of Gilby Clark, of course from Guns N' Roses fame. And this is very much a throwback kind of rock album, back when rock was more energetic, raw, kind of had that in-your-face kind of sound. And this is another one of those albums where the band, I think, did a really good job of capturing that live music sound. And it's an album that makes Frankie and the Studs, I think, one of the more intriguing newer bands out there. That's another one of those albums where every time I listen to this one, it just keeps getting better and better. So the album that I've got at number 1, it's my number 1 album of the year so far, is one that if you're in the Vinyl Den Facebook group, you're probably not all that surprised to see this one here. Just came out on June 20th, and that is Idols by Youngblood. I think this is a huge return to form album for him. When he released his self-titled album in 2022, I thought it was okay. I thought it was a big step down from the stuff he'd released earlier in his career, though. This is much more of an experimental album for him. He took that pop punk style that he had earlier in his career, and he's evolved way past that. He's got elements of glam rock in here. You can hear a lot of 90s Britpop in here also. And listen to this album a few times. It's very clear that he was highly influenced by artists like David Bowie, U2, The Verve, The Cure. Oasis also sounds like a big influence on this album. And he's had a lot of success with this album so far. It's his 3rd straight album to hit number 1 in the UK. It only hit number 73 here in the US in the Billboard 200, though. I think what makes this album so special, it's not the big singles like Hello Heaven Hello or Zombie, which the video for Zombie's got like several million views on YouTube. I think it's really the lesser known tracks on here that makes this album really what it is. As much as I like his first couple of albums, I think this is hands down his best, and it's definitely his most cohesive album also. And this is an album where, I know there's a lot of time left in the year, and I know there's going to be a lot of other great albums get released, but I really think this is going to be a hard album to beat. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think are the top 5 albums of the year so far. I get it. Music is very subjective. Everyone's going to have a different list. But I think what's great about videos like this is in the comments, everyone dropping what their favorite albums of the year so far and opening up other people to other great albums they might have overlooked. So that's why I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.